Hello and welcome to Bookspot. I'm Earl Weinberg. This time we will continue our reading of Have Spacesuit Will Travel by Robert Heinlein. Our hero Kip has met a little girl named Peewee, and together they have been kidnapped to the moon by an alien. How do you like that for space opera? Chapter 5. When I was a kid, we used to pretend we were making the first landing on the moon. Then I gave up romantic notions and realized that I would have to go about it another way. But I never thought I would get there penned up, unable to see out, like a mouse in a shoebox. The only thing that proved I was on the moon was my weight. High gravity can be managed anywhere with centrifuges. Low gravity is another matter. On Earth, the most you can squeeze out is a few seconds going off a high board, or by parachute delay, or stunts in a plane. If low gravity goes on, then wherever you are not on Earth. Well, I wasn't on Mars. It had to be the moon. On the moon, I should weigh a little over 25 pounds. It felt about so. I felt light enough to walk on the lawn and not bend the grass. For a few minutes, I simply exulted in it, forgetting him and the trouble we were in, just heel and toe around the room, getting the wonderful feel of it, bouncing a little and bumping my head against the ceiling, and feeling how slowly I settled back to the floor. Peewee sat down, shrugged her shoulders, and gave a little smile, an annoyingly patronizing one. The old moon hand, all of 2 weeks more of it than I had had. Low gravity has its disconcerting tricks. Your feet hardly give any traction and they fly out from under you. I had to learn with muscles and reflexes what I had known only intellectually, that when weight goes down, mass and inertia do not. To change direction, even in walking, you had to lean the way you would to round a turn on a board track. And even then, if you don't have traction, which I didn't in socks on a smooth floor, your feet go out from under you. A fall doesn't hurt much in 1/6 gravity, but Pee-wee giggled. I sat up and said, "Go ahead, laugh, Smarty. You can afford to. You've got tennis shoes." "I'm sorry, but you looked silly hanging there like a slow motion picture and grabbing air." "No doubt, very funny." I said I was sorry. "Look, you can borrow my shoes." I looked at her feet, then at mine, and snorted. "Gee, thanks." "Well, you could cut the heels out or something. It wouldn't bother me. Nothing ever does. Where are your shoes, Kip?" About a 250,000 miles away, unless we got off at the wrong stop." "Oh, well, you won't need them much here." "Yeah." I chewed my lip thinking about here, and no longer interested in games with gravity. "Pee-wee, what do we do now?" "About what?" "About him." "Nothing. What can we do?" "And what do we do?" "Sleep." "Huh?" "Sleep. Sleep that knits up the raveled sleeve of care. Tired nature's sweet restorer, balmy sleep. Blessings on him who invented sleep, the mantle that covers all human thoughts. Quit showing off and talk sense." I am talking sense. At the moment, we're as helpless as goldfish. We are simply trying to survive, and the first principle of survival is not to worry about the impossible and concentrate on what's possible. I'm hungry and thirsty and uncomfortable and very tired, and all I can do about it is sleep. So if you'll kindly keep quiet, that's what I'll do. I can take a hint, no need to snap at me. I'm sorry, but I get cross as two sticks when I'm tired, and Daddy says I'm simply frightful before breakfast. She curled up in a little ball and tucked that filthy rag doll under her chin. "Good night, Pip." "Good night, Pee-wee." I thought of something and started to speak and saw that she was asleep. She was breathing softly and her face had smoothed out and no longer looked alert and smart alecky. Her upper lip pooched out in a baby pout and she looked like a dirty-faced cherub. There were streaks where she had apparently cried and not wiped it away, but she had never let me see her crying. "Kip," I said to myself, "you get yourself into the darndest things. This is much worse than bringing home a stray pup or a kitten." But I had to take care of her, or die trying. Well, maybe I would. Die trying, I mean. It didn't look as if I were any great shakes even taking care of myself. I yawned, then yawned again. Maybe the shrimp had more sense than I had at that. I was more tired than I ever had been, and hungry and thirsty and not comfortable other ways. I thought about banging on the door panel and trying to attract the fat one or his skinny partner. But that would wake Pee-wee, and it might antagonize him. So I sprawled on my back the way I nap on the living room rug at home. I found that a hard floor does not require any one sleeping position on the moon. 1/6 gravity is a better mattress than all the foam rubber ever made. That fussy princess in Hans Christian Andersen's story would have had no complaints. I went to sleep at once. It was the wildest space opera I had ever seen, loaded with dragons and Arcturian maidens and knights in shining space armor and shuttling between King Arthur's court and the Dead Sea bottoms of Barsoom. I didn't mind that, but I did mind the announcer. He had the voice of Ace Quiggle and the face of him. He leaned out of the screen and leered, those wormy cilia writhing. Will Beowulf conquer the dragon? Will Tristan return to Isolde? Will Pee-wee find her dolly? Tune in this channel tomorrow night, and in the meantime, wake up and hurry to your neighborhood druggist for a cake of Skyway's quick bright armor polish, the better polish used by knights, sans peur et sans reproche. Wake up! Wake up! He shoved a snaky arm out of the screen and grabbed my shoulder. I woke up. Wake up, Pee-wee was saying, shaking my shoulder. Please wake up, Kim. Let me alone. You're having a nightmare. The Arcturian princess had been in a bad spot. Now I'll never know how it came out. What'd you wake me for? I thought the idea was to sleep. You've slept for hours, and now perhaps there's something we can do. Breakfast, maybe? She ignored that. I think we should try to escape. I sat up suddenly, bounced off the floor, settled back. Whoops, how? I don't know exactly, but I think they have gone away and left us. If so, we'll never have a better chance. They have? What makes you think so? Listen. Listen hard. I listened. I could hear my heart beat. I could hear Pee-wee breathing, and presently I could hear her heart beating. I'd never heard deeper silence in a cave. I took my knife, held it in my teeth for bone conduction, and pushed it against a wall. Nothing. I tried the floor and all the other walls. Still nothing. The ship ached with silence. No throb, no thump, not even those vibrations you can sense but not hear. You're right, Pee-wee. I noticed it when the air circulation stopped. I sniffed. Are we running out of air? Not right away, but the air stopped. It comes out of those tiny holes up there. You don't notice it, but I missed something when it stopped. I thought hard. I don't see where this gets us. We're still locked up. I'm not sure. I tried the blade of my knife on a wall. It wasn't metal or anything. I thought hard. I don't see where this gets us. We're still locked up. I'm not sure. I tried the blade of my knife on a wall. It wasn't metal or anything I knew as plastic, but it didn't mind a knife. Maybe the Comte de Monte Cristo would have dug a hole in it, but he had more time. How do you figure? Every time they've opened or closed that door panel, I've heard a click. So after they took you out, I stuck a wad of bubble gum where the panel meets the wall, high up where they might not notice. You've got some gum? Yes, it helps when you can't get a drink of water. I got any more? I asked eagerly. I wasn't fresh in any way, but thirst was the worst. I'd never been so thirsty. Pee-wee looked upset. Oh, poor Kip, I haven't any more. Just an old wad I kept parked in my belt buckle and chewed when I felt driest. She frowned. But you can have it. You're welcome. Uh, thanks, Pee-wee. Thanks a lot, but I guess not. She looked insulted. I assure you, Mr. Russell, that I do not have anything contagious. I was merely trying to. Yes, yes, I said hastily. I'm sure you were, but I assumed that these were emergency conditions. It is surely no more unsanitary than kissing a girl, but I don't suppose you ever have kissed a girl. Not lately, I evaded. But what I want is a drink of clear, cold water, or murky, warm water. Besides, you used up your gum on the door panel. What did you expect to accomplish? Oh, I told you about that click. Daddy says that in a dilemma, it is helpful to change any variable, then re-examine the problem. I tried to introduce a change with my bubble gum. Well, when they brought you back, then closed the door, I didn't hear a click. What? Then you thought you had bamboozled their lock hours and hours ago, and you didn't tell me? That is correct. Why, I ought to spank you. I don't advise it, she said frostily. I bite. I believed her, and scratch and other things, none of them pleasant. I changed the subject. Why didn't you tell me, Pee-wee? I was afraid you might try to get out. Huh? I certainly would have. Precisely. But I wanted that panel closed as long as he was out there. Maybe she was a genius, compared with me. I see your point. All right, let's see if we can get it open. I examined the panel. The wad of gum was there, up as high as she could reach, and from the way it was mashed, it did seem possible that it had followed the groove the panel slid into, but I couldn't see any crack down the edge. I tried the point of my big blade on it. The panel seemed to creep to the right an eighth of an inch. Then the blade broke. I closed the stub and put the knife away. Any ideas? Maybe if we put our hands flat against it and tried to drag it. Okay. I wiped sweat from my hands on my shirt. Now, easy does it, just enough pressure for friction. The panel slid to the right almost an inch and stopped firmly. But there was a hairline crack from floor to ceiling. I broke off the stub of the big blade this time. The crack was no wider. Pee-wee said, "Oh dear." "We aren't licked." I backed off and ran toward the door. Toward, not to. My feet skidded. I leveled off and did a leisurely belly flop. Pee-wee did not laugh. I picked myself up, got against the far wall, braced one foot against it, and tried a swimming racing start. I got as far as the door panel before losing my footing. I didn't hit it very hard, but I felt it spring. It bulged a little, then sprang back. "Wait a sec, Kip," said Pee-wee. "Take your socks off. I'll get behind you and push. My tennis shoes don't slip." She was right. On the moon, if you can't get rubber-soled shoes, you're better off barefooted. We backed against the far wall. Pee-wee behind me with her hands on my hips. 1, 2, 3, go! We advanced with the grace of a hippopotamus. I hurt my shoulder, but the panel sprung out of its track, leaving a space 4 inches wide at the bottom and tapering to the top. I left skin on the door frame and tore my shirt and was hampered in language by the presence of a girl. But the opening widened. When it was wide enough for my head, I got down flat and peered out. There was nobody in sight, a foregone conclusion with the noise I had made, unless they were playing cat and mouse, which I wouldn't put past them, especially him. Pee-wee started to wriggle through. I dragged her back. "Naughty, naughty, I go first." 2 more heaves, and it was wide enough for me. I opened the small blade of my knife and handed it to Pee-wee. "With your shielder on it, soldier." "You take it. I won't need it. Two-fisted death, they call me around dark alleys." This was propaganda, but why worry her? Sans peur et sans reproche. Maiden rescuing done cheaply, special rates for parties. I eased out on elbows and knees, stood up, and looked around. "Come on out," I said quietly. She started to, then backed up suddenly. She reappeared, clutching that bedraggled dolly. "I almost forgot Madame Pompadour," she said breathlessly. I didn't even smile. "Well," she said defensively, "I have to have her to get to sleep at night. It's my one neurotic quirk, but Daddy says I'll outgrow it." "Sure, sure." "Don't look so smug. It's not fetishism, not even primitive animism. It's merely a conditioned reflex. I'm aware that it's just a doll. I've understood the pathetic fallacy for, oh, years and years." "Look, Pee-wee," I said earnestly, "I don't care how you get to sleep. Personally, I hit myself over the head with a hammer. But quit yakking. Do you know the layout of these ships?" She looked around. "I think this is the ship that chased me, but it looks the same as the one I piloted." "All right, should we head for the control room?" "Huh? You flew the other heap. Can you fly this one?" Uh, I guess so. Yes, I can." "Then let's go." I started in the direction they had lugged me. "But the other time I had the mother thing to tell me what to do. Let's find her." I stopped. "Can you get it off the ground?" "Well, yes." "Well, let's look for her after we're in the air, in space, I mean. If she's aboard, we'll find her. If she's not, there's not a thing we can do." "Well, all right, I see your logic. I don't have to like it." She tagged along. Kip, how many gravities can you stand? Huh? I haven't the slightest idea. Why? Because these things can go lots faster than I dared try when I escaped before. That was my mistake. Your mistake was in heading for New Jersey. But I had to find Daddy. Sure, sure, eventually. But you should have ducked over to Lunar Base and yelled for the Federation Space Corps. This is no job for a pop gun. We need help. Any idea where we are? Hmm, I think so. If he took us back to their base, I'll know when I look at the sky. All right, if you can figure out where Lunar Base is from here, that's where we'll go. If not, well, we'll head for New Jersey at all the push it has. The control room door latched, and I could not figure out how to open it. Pee Wee did what she said should work, which was to stick her little finger into a hole mine would not enter, and told me it must be locked. So I looked around. I found a metal bar racked in the corridor, a thing about 5 feet long, pointed at one end and with four handles like brass knuckles on the other. I didn't know what it was, the goblin equivalent of a fire axe, possibly, but it was a fine wrecking bar. I made a shambles of that door in 3 minutes. We went in. My first feeling was gooseflesh, because here was where I had been grilled by him. I tried not to show it. If he turned up, I was going to let him have his wrecking bar right between his grisly eyes. I looked around, really seeing the place for the first time. There was sort of a nest in the middle, surrounded by what could have been a very fancy coffee maker or a velocipede for an octopus. I was glad Pee Wee knew which button to push. How do you see out? Like this. Pee Wee squeezed past and put a finger into a hole I hadn't noticed. The ceiling was hemispherical, like a planetarium, which is what it was, for it lighted up. I gasped. It was suddenly not a floor we were on, but a platform, apparently out in the open and maybe 30 feet in the air. Over me were star images, thousands of them, in a black sky, and facing me, big as a dozen full moons, and green and blue and lovely and beautiful, was Earth. Pee Wee touched my elbow. Snap out of it, Kip, I said in a choked voice. Pee Wee, don't you have any poetry in your soul? Sure, I have oodles, but we haven't time. I know where we are, Kip, back where I started from. Their base. See those rocks with the long, jagged shadows? Some of them are ships, camouflaged. And over to the left, that high peak with the saddle, a little further left, almost due west, is Tombaugh Station, 40 miles away. About 200 miles farther is Lunar Base, and beyond is Luna City. How long will it take? 200, nearly 250 miles. I've never tried a point to point on the moon, but it shouldn't take more than a few minutes. Let's go. They might come back any minute. Yes, Kip. She crawled into that jackdaw's nest and bent over a sector. Presently she looked up. Her face was white and thin and very little girlish. Kip, we aren't going anywhere. I'm sorry. I let out a yelp. What? What's the matter? Have you forgotten how to run it? No, the brain is gone. The which? The brain. Little black dingus about the size of a walnut that fits in this cavity. She showed me. We got away because the mother thing managed to steal one. We were locked in an empty ship just as you and I are now, but she had one and we got away. Pee Wee looked bleak and very lost. I should have known that he wouldn't leave one in the control room. I guess I did and didn't want to admit it. I'm sorry. Uh, Look, Pee Wee, we don't have to give up that easily. Maybe I can make something to fit that socket. Like jumping wires in a car? She shook her head. It's not that simple, Kim. If you put a wooden model in place of the generator in a car, would it run? I don't quite know what it does, but I called it the brain because it's very complex. But I shut up. If a Borneo savage had a brand new car complete except for spark plugs, would he get it running? Echo answers mournfully. Pee Wee, what's the next best thing? Any ideas? Because if you haven't, I want you to show me the airlock. I'll take this, I took my wrecking bar, and bash anything that comes through. I'm stumped, she admitted. I want to look for the mother thing. If she's shut up in this ship, she may know what to do. All right, but first show me the airlock. You can look for her while I stand guard. I felt the reckless anger of desperation. I didn't see how we were ever going to get out, and I was beginning to believe that we weren't. But there was still a reckoning due. He was going to learn that it wasn't safe to push people around. I was sure I was fairly sure that I could sock him before my spine turned to jelly, splash that repulsive head, if I didn't look into his eyes. Pee-wee said slowly, "There's one other thing." "What?" "I hate to suggest it. You might think I was running out on you." "Don't be silly. If you've got an idea, spill it." "Well, there's Tombaugh Station over that way about 40 miles. If my spacesuit is in the ship." I suddenly quit feeling like Bowie at the Alamo. Maybe the game would go an extra period. "We can walk it." She shook her head. "No, Kip, that's why I hesitated to mention it. I can walk it if we find my suit, but you couldn't wear my suit even if you squatted." "I don't need your suit," I said impatiently. Kip, this is the moon, remember? No air." Yes, sure, think I'm an idiot. But if they locked up your suit, they probably put mine right beside it. And you've got a spacesuit?" she said incredulously. Our next remarks were too confused to repeat, but finally Pee-wee was convinced that I really did own a spacesuit, that in fact the only reason I was sending on the space operations span 12 hours and a quarter million miles back was that I was wearing it when they grabbed me. "Let's tear the joint apart," I said. "No, show me that airlock and then you take it apart." "All right." She showed me the lock, a room much like the one we had been cooped up in, but smaller and with an inner door built to take a pressure load. It was not locked. We opened it cautiously. It was empty, and its outer door was closed, or we would never have been able to open the inner. I said, if Wormface had been a suspenders and belt man, he would have left the outer door open, even though he had it locked up. Then, wait a second, is there a way to latch the inner door open? I don't know. We'll see. There was a simple hook, but to make sure that it couldn't be unlatched by button pushing from outside, I wedged it with my knife. "You're sure this is the only airlock?" "The other ship had only one, and I'm pretty certain they are alike." "We'll keep our eyes open. Nobody can get at us through this one. Even old Wormface has to use an airlock." "But suppose he opens the outer door anyhow," Pee-wee said nervously. "We'd pop like balloons." I looked at her and grinned. Who's the genius? Sure we would, if he did, but he won't. Not with 25 tons of pressure holding it closed. As you reminded me, this is the moon. No air outside, remember? "Oh," Pee-wee looked sheepish. So we searched. I enjoyed wrecking doors. Wormface wasn't going to like me. One of the first things we found was a smelly little hole that Fatty and Skinny lived in. The door was not locked, which was a shame. That room told me a lot about that pair. It showed me they were pigs, with habits as unattractive as their morals. The room also showed me they were not casual prisoners. It had been refitted for humans. Their relationship with Wormface, whatever it was, had gone on for some time and was continuing. There were 2 empty racks for spacesuits, several dozen canned rations of the sort sold in military surplus stores, and the best of all, there was drinking water and a washroom of sorts, and something more precious than fine gold or frankincense if we found our suits, 2 charged bottles of oxyhelium. I took a drink, opened a can of food for Pee-wee. It opened with a key. We weren't in the predicament of the 3 men in a boat with their tin of pineapple. Told her to grab a bite and then searched that room. I went on with my giant toad sticker. Those charged air bottles had given me an unbearable itch to find our suits and get out before Wormface returned. I smashed a dozen doors as fast as the walrus and the carpenter opened oysters and found all sorts of things, including what must have been living quarters for worm faces. But I didn't stop to look. The Space Corps could do that if and when. I simply made sure there was not a spacesuit in any of them. And found them in a compartment next to the one we had been prisoners in. I was so glad to see Oscar I could have kissed him. I shouted, "Hi, pal, mirabile visu," and ran to get Pee-wee. My feet went out from under me again, but I didn't care. Pee-wee looked up as I rushed in. "I was just going to look for you." Got it. "You found the mother thing?" she said eagerly. "Huh? No. The spacesuits, yours and mine. Let's go." "Oh," she looked disappointed, and I felt hurt. "That's good, but we have to find the mother thing first." I was beyond endurance. Here we had a chance, slim but real, to escape a fate worse than death. I'm not using a figure of speech. And she wanted to hang around to search for a bug-eyed monster. For any human being, even a stranger with halitosis, I would have done it. For a dog or a cat, I would, although reluctantly. But what had a bug-eyed monster to do with me? All this one had done was to get me into the worst jam I had ever been in. I considered socking Pee-wee and stuffing her into her suit, but I said, "Are you crazy? We're leaving right now. We can't go till we find her." "Now I know you're crazy. We don't even know she's here, and if we do find her, we can't take her with us." "Oh, but we will." "How? This is the moon, remember? No air. Got a spacesuit for her?" But that stonkered her, but not for long. She had been sitting on the floor, holding the rations can between her knees. She stood up suddenly, bouncing a little, and said, "Do as you like. I'm going to find her. Here." She shoved the can at me. I should have used force, but I am handicapped by training from early childhood never to strike a female, no matter how richly she deserves it. So the opportunity and Pee-wee both slid past while I was torn between common sense and upbringing. I simply groaned helplessly. Then I became aware of an unbearably attractive odor. I was holding that can. It contained boiled shoe leather and gray gravy and smelled ambrosial. Pee-wee had eaten half. I ate the rest while looking at what she had found. There was a coil of nylon rope, which I happily put with the air bottles. Oscar had 50 feet of clothesline clipped to his belt, but that had been a penny-saving expedient. There was a prospector's hammer, which I salvaged, and 2 batteries, which would do for headlamps and things. The only other items of interest were a government printing office publication titled Preliminary Report on Selenology, a pamphlet on uranium prospecting, and an expired Utah driver's license for Timothy Johnson. I recognized the older man's mean face. The pamphlets interested me, but this was no time for excess baggage. The main furniture was 2 beds, curved like contour chairs and deeply padded. They told me that Skinny and Fatty had ridden this ship at high acceleration. When I mopped the last of the gravy with a finger, I took a big drink and washed my hands, using water lavishly because I didn't care if that pair died of thirst. I grabbed my plunder and headed for the room where the spacesuits were. As I got there, I ran into Pee-wee. She was carrying the crowbar and looking overjoyed. "I found her!" "Where?" "Come on, I can't get it open. I'm not strong enough." I put the stuff with our suits and followed her. She stopped at a door panel farther along the corridor than my vandalism had taken me. "In there." I looked and I listened. "What makes you think so?" "I know. Open it." I shrugged and got to work with the nut pick. The panel went sprung, and that was that. Curled up in the middle of the floor was a creature. So far as I could tell, it might or might not have been the one I had seen in the pasture the night before. The light had been poor, the conditions very different, and my examination had ended abruptly. But Pee-wee was in no doubt. She launched herself through the air with a squeal of joy, and the two rolled over and over like kittens play fighting. Pee-wee was making sounds of joy more or less in English. So was the mother thing, but not in English. I would not have been surprised if she had spoken English, since Wormface did, and since Pee-wee had mentioned things the mother thing had told her, but she didn't. Did you ever listen to a mockingbird? Sometimes singing melodies, sometimes just sending up a joyous noise unto the Lord. The endlessly varied songs of a mockingbird are the nearest to the speech of the mother thing. At last they held still more or less, and Pee-wee said, "Oh, mother thing, I'm so happy." The creature sang to her. Pee-wee answered, "Oh, I'm forgetting my manners. Mother thing, this is my dear friend Kip." The mother thing sang to me, and I understood. What she said was, "I am very happy to know you, Kip." It didn't come out in words, but it might as well have been English, nor was this half-kidding self-deception such as my conversations with Oscar or Pee-wee's with Madame Pompadour. When I talk with Oscar, I am both sides of the conversation. It's just my conscious talking to my subconscious or some such. This was not that. The mother thing sang to me, and I understood. I was startled but not unbelieving. When you see a rainbow, you don't stop to argue the laws of optics. There it is, in the sky. And we will meet the mother thing further next time.